What would you do if your husband moved his mistress into your backyard? Would you fight? Would you leave? I did neither. Instead, I let her settle in, get comfortable, even redecorate, because I knew something she didn't. Something that would turn her entire world upside down in exactly 90 days. But let me start from the beginning, because this story, my story, isn't just about revenge. It's about patience, about power, and about the moment I stopped being the woman everyone underestimated and became the one holding all the cards. Before we dive in, if you're enjoying this, please hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe with notifications on. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more stories like this one. My name is Victoria Reed. I'm 35 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had the perfect life. I live in Austin, Texas, in a beautiful craftsman-style house in the Clarksville neighborhood, one of those areas where old money meets new tech money, where historic homes sit on large lots with mature oak trees and swimming pools. The house belonged to my grandmother. She left it to me when she passed away 10 years ago, along with a substantial trust fund. The property alone is worth over $3 million now, sitting on almost an acre of land in one of the most desirable zip codes in Austin. The main house is 3,000 square feet, and there's a separate guest house in the back, a charming 800 square foot cottage that my grandmother used as her art studio. I met my husband, Derek Reed, 8 years ago at a charity gala. I was working as an art curator at a private gallery, building a career I loved. Derek was in commercial real estate development, charming and ambitious, with dark hair and the kind of confidence that made you believe he could accomplish anything. We dated for a year before he proposed, a sunset proposal at Zilker Park, complete with a string quartet and champagne. It was romantic and public, the kind of proposal that got posted on social media and made everyone sigh. We got married at the Driscoll Hotel, a beautiful historic venue in downtown Austin. 200 guests, an 8-tier cake, a honeymoon in the Maldives. Everything picture perfect. And for a while it was perfect. Or at least I thought it was. Derek's real estate business was growing. He was developing mixed-use properties across Austin, riding the wave of the city's tech boom. We had dinner parties with influential people. We went to galas and fundraisers. We were the couple everyone wanted to be. I eventually left my gallery job to focus on building my own art consulting business. I had enough money from my trust fund that I didn't need to work, but I wanted to. I loved art, loved helping clients build their collections, loved the creative challenge of matching pieces to spaces. My business was small but successful. I worked from home mostly, which meant I was around the house a lot, which is how I started noticing things. Small things at first. Derek working late more often, taking phone calls in other rooms. His phone face down on tables, when before he never cared who saw his screen. Then there were the receipts. Dinners at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel charges in cities where he claimed to be staying with business associates. A jewelry purchase for $1,500 that I never received. I'm not stupid. I knew what these signs meant. But I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I did something else. I hired a private investigator. Her name was Angela Torres, and she came highly recommended by a lawyer friend. She was a former police detective who now ran her own investigation firm. I need you to follow my husband, I told her at our first meeting in a coffee shop in South Austin. I think he's cheating, but I need proof before I confront him. Angela was professional and direct. How long have you suspected? About 3 months, I said. But I want to be absolutely sure before I make any decisions. Smart, Angela said. Too many people confront without evidence, and the spouse just denies everything. By the time you're ready to act, I'll have everything you need. She was right. Over the next month, Angela followed Derek. She documented everything with photos, videos, and detailed reports. And what she found was worse than I'd imagined. Her name was Sienna Blake. 26 years old, a yoga instructor Derek had met at the gym. Blonde, tan, the kind of effortlessly beautiful that came from being young and carefree. They'd been seeing each other for 8 months, which meant Derek had been lying to me for most of a year. Angela's photos showed them together at restaurants, checking into hotels, walking hand in hand through parks. In some of the photos, Derek looked happier than I'd seen him in years. The final report Angela gave me was damning. 50 pages of documented infidelity, complete with timestamps, locations, and photo evidence. She'd even managed to record a conversation between Derek and Sienna where he talked about how he was going to leave Victoria soon and how they could finally be together for real. I sat in my home office, reading through that report, feeling my perfectly constructed life crumble around me. But underneath the hurt and betrayal, something else was growing. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. I could have confronted Derek immediately. I could have thrown him out, filed for divorce, taken him for everything he was worth in court. But then something happened that changed everything. I was reviewing my financial documents, something I did quarterly to keep track of my investments and trust fund. And I noticed something odd. The property deed for our house, the one my grandmother had left me, had been transferred into a joint marital property title 2 years ago. I didn't remember signing anything to make that change. I called my lawyer immediately. His name was Marcus Hoffman, and he'd been managing my family's legal affairs for years. "Marcus, can you pull the property records for my house?" I asked. "Something doesn't look right." He called me back 2 hours later, and his voice was grim. "Victoria, we have a problem. The deed shows that the property was transferred to joint ownership 2 years ago. But the signature on the transfer documents doesn't match your signature on file." My blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying someone forged your signature. And based on the notary stamp, this was done at Derek's real estate office." The pieces fell into place like dominoes. Derek had forged my signature to put the house, my grandmother's house, my house, into joint ownership, which meant if we divorced, he could claim half of its value. $3 million, divided in half. $1.5 million that Derek was planning to steal from me. Can he do that? I asked Marcus. Can he claim half the house in a divorce, even though the signature was forged? "It's complicated," Marcus said. "We can prove the forgery, but it'll take time and legal battles." Meanwhile, Derek could tie up the property in court for years. And Victoria, if he's planning to divorce you anyway, he might sell to a third party before you can stop him. Marital property can be liquidated if both parties agree to divorce. "But I won't agree to sell," I said. "If you're divorcing, a judge might order the sale anyway to divide assets," Marcus explained. "Especially if Derek claims he needs his share of the marital property to start his new life." I felt sick. Derek hadn't just been cheating on me. He'd been planning this. Forging documents, transferring property, setting up his exit strategy. And he thought I was too naive, too trusting, too stupid to notice. He was wrong. "Marcus," I said slowly, an idea forming. "What if we don't get divorced right now? What if I wait? Wait for what? Wait for the right moment. Wait until I have every piece of leverage I need to make sure Derek walks away with nothing." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Victoria, what are you planning?" "I need to do some research first," I said. "But Marcus, if I can prove Derek forged that deed with intent to defraud me, what happens?" "That's felony forgery," Marcus said. "Especially with property values that high. He could face jail time. And he'd forfeit any claim to the property." "Good," I said. "That's very good." Over the next week, I did my research. I gathered every financial document I could find. I reviewed our bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. I looked for any other irregularities, any other signs of Derek's planning. And I found them. Derek had been moving money. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Transferring funds from our joint accounts into accounts I didn't have access to. Paying down his business debts with money from my trust fund distributions. Building up his own financial position while quietly draining mine. It was sophisticated, subtle. If I hadn't been looking for it, I never would have noticed. But now that I saw the pattern, it was unmistakable. Derek wasn't just having an affair. He was financially planning to leave me while making sure he took as much of my wealth as possible. The betrayal went deeper than I'd imagined. This wasn't just about love or attraction or finding someone new. This was calculated theft. And that's when I decided I wasn't going to be the victim. I was going to be the architect of Derek's downfall. But I needed time. Time to gather more evidence. Time to build an airtight case. Time to make sure when I finally made my move, Derek would have no escape. So I did something that probably sounds crazy. I decided to act like I didn't know. I went about my daily life as if everything was normal. I smiled when Derek came home. I asked about his day. I made dinner and pretended to care about his business deals. And Derek, convinced I was clueless, got bolder. That's when he suggested Sienna move into the guest house. It was a Tuesday evening in April. We were having dinner, Thai takeout, because neither of us felt like cooking. Derek cleared his throat in that way he did when he was about to say something he knew I wouldn't like. "Vic, I need to talk to you about something," he said. I looked up from my pad thai, my face carefully neutral. "What's that?" "You know my buddy from college, Sienna? The one who's going through a rough time?" "My buddy." I almost laughed, but I kept my expression concerned. "The one whose apartment flooded?" "Yeah," Derek said. He was so practiced at lying now. "Her place is uninhabitable for at least 3 months while they do repairs. She's been staying in hotels, and it's draining her savings." I was thinking, what if she stayed in the guest house? Just temporarily. She'd pay rent, obviously. It would help her out, and it would give us some extra income. I pretended to consider it. "I don't know, Derek. That's a big ask. Having someone living on our property. She's quiet, responsible. You'd barely notice she's there," Derek said. "And honestly, that guest house just sits empty. We might as well use it." I could see the strategy. Derek wanted his mistress close by. Maybe he was getting tired of sneaking around. Maybe he wanted to flaunt her in front of me, test how oblivious I really was. Or maybe he was planning his exit and wanted Sienna settled before he made his move. Any normal wife would have said no. Would have gotten suspicious. Would have demanded to meet this Sienna first. But I wasn't a normal wife anymore. I was a woman with a plan. "How much rent are we talking?" I asked. Derek looked surprised that I was even considering it. I was thinking $1,500 a month? $1,500 for an 800-square-foot cottage in Clarksville? That was highway robbery. But I smiled. "Make it $2,000 and she pays utilities," I said. "And I want first and last month's rent up front." Derek's face lit up. "Really? You're okay with this?" "Sure," I said with a shrug. "Like you said, the guest house is just sitting there. We might as well make some money off it." What I didn't tell Derek was that by accepting rent from Sienna, I was turning her into a tenant on my property, which meant I could control the terms of her stay, which meant I was putting her exactly where I wanted her, under my roof, under my rules, and most importantly, under my observation. Derek set everything up quickly. Within a week, Sienna Blake was moving into my guest house. I watched from my kitchen window as Derek helped her carry boxes from her car. She was pretty, I'd give her that. Long blonde hair, athletic build, yoga pants, and a tank top that showed off her flat stomach. She looked young and carefree, and completely unaware that she was walking into a trap. I waited until they'd finished unloading before I walked over to introduce myself. I said brightly, extending my hand. "You must be Sienna."
I'm Victoria.
"Welcome." Sienna looked surprised. Maybe Derek had told her I'd be cold or hostile. But I was the picture of warmth. "Oh, hi, Victoria," she said, shaking my hand. "Thank you so much for letting me stay here. This is such a lifesaver with the apartment situation." "Of course," I said. "Derek said you're going through a tough time. We're happy to help." Derek stood there, looking uncomfortable as his wife and mistress made small talk. I could see him trying to read me, trying to figure out if I suspected anything. But I gave him nothing. Just a pleasant smile and friendly conversation. "Let me know if you need anything," I told Sienna. "I'm usually home during the day working, so if there are any issues with the cottage, just knock on the door." "I will. Thank you," Sienna said. As I walked back to the main house, I felt Derek's eyes on me. He was confused. He'd expected jealousy, suspicion, maybe even a fight. Instead, I'd been gracious and accommodating. Good. Let him wonder. Let him think he was getting away with it. Because in 90 days, everything would change. That 90-day timeline wasn't arbitrary. It was carefully calculated based on several factors I discovered in my research. First, Texas property law. To establish adverse possession rights or make certain claims on property, you need to show continuous occupation. But more importantly, Derek's real estate business had a major deal closing in exactly 91 days. A commercial development he'd been working on for 2 years. When that deal closed, he'd receive a $5 million payout. I'd found the contract in his home office. And I'd noticed something interesting. The payout was going directly to Derek's business account, not our joint accounts. He was planning to keep that money separate from marital assets. But here's what Derek didn't know. Texas is a community property state. Any money earned during the marriage is automatically joint property, regardless of which account it goes into. If I filed for divorce before that deal closed, I'd be entitled to half of that $5 million. But if I waited until after the deal closed, Derek would have already received the money. And if he'd already started divorce proceedings by then, he could argue that the payout came after our separation. So my timeline was specific. Let Sienna move in and get comfortable. Let Derek think he was in control. Wait until the deal closed and the money hit his account. And then make my move, taking him down before he could transfer those funds or hide them. 90 days. That's all I needed. In the meantime, I played the role of the oblivious wife perfectly. I'd waved to Sienna when I saw her coming and going. I even brought her a plate of cookies the first week, just being neighborly. She seemed genuinely confused by my kindness. Derek must have painted me as a cold, difficult wife. Finding out I was actually nice probably messed with her head a bit. Derek was getting more confident too. He'd go to the guest house in the evenings claiming he was checking on Sienna or fixing something for her. Sometimes he wouldn't come back to the main house until late at night. I didn't say anything. Didn't confront him. Just noted every visit, every time he thought I wasn't paying attention. Meanwhile, I was building my case. Angela, my investigator, was still documenting everything. Now that Sienna was on my property, it was even easier to gather evidence. Angela set up surveillance cameras, with my permission on my property, that captured Derek coming and going from the guest house. Captured him kissing Sienna goodbye. Captured them laughing together while I was inside the main house alone. Marcus, my lawyer, was preparing 2 sets of documents. One was a straightforward divorce petition. The other was a criminal complaint for forgery, fraud, and theft. We'd file whichever made the most sense when the time came. And I was documenting everything financial. Every time Derek moved money, I took screenshots. Every time he paid for something for Sienna, and he paid for a lot, I documented it. Dinners, clothes, even a new laptop. All purchased with money from our joint accounts or from my trust fund distributions. He was making this so easy for me. 6 weeks into the 90-day countdown, something interesting happened. I was working in my home office when I heard a knock on the door. It was Sienna. "Hey, Victoria," she said, looking slightly embarrassed. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but the hot water heater in the cottage is acting up. Derek said he'd look at it, but he's at work and I really need to shower." "Come on in," I said, opening the door wider. "You can use the guest bathroom here while we get that fixed." "Are you sure?" Sienna asked. "I don't want to impose." "It's no problem at all," I said. "I'll call a plumber to look at the cottage heater this afternoon." Sienna looked genuinely grateful. "Thank you so much. You've been so nice about all of this. Derek said you could be, well, he said you might not be thrilled about having someone living in the guest house. Did he?" I said mildly. "Well, it's my property. If I wasn't thrilled, I wouldn't have agreed." While Sienna showered, I called a plumber. And I made sure to get one who'd take his time with the repair and charge a premium. Every expense Derek racked up with his mistress living here was documented, adding to the eventual bill he'd owe. But what was most interesting was what Sienna had said. Derek had painted me as difficult, unpleasant, probably cold and controlling, all the things men say about their wives when they're justifying affairs. I wondered what else Derek had told her. Did she know about my grandmother's house? Did she know about my trust fund? Did she have any idea that she wasn't just Derek's mistress, but an unwitting participant in his plan to steal my property and my money? Probably not. She seemed nice enough. Naive, maybe. Definitely young. She probably believed whatever romantic story Derek had told her, that he was trapped in a loveless marriage, that he was leaving me soon, that they'd build a life together once he was free. She had no idea that Derek didn't love her any more than he loved me. She was just a tool in his exit strategy. A way to replace one comfortable life with another. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. At the 8-week mark, Derek made his biggest mistake yet. I found the paperwork in his office. He'd gotten careless, probably because he thought I never looked through his things. It was a property appraisal for a house. $3.2 million. And attached to it was a draft sales agreement. Derek was planning to sell. To force the sale of my grandmother's house and take half the proceeds. The sales agreement even had a proposed closing date, 1 week after his big development deal was supposed to close. He'd get his $5 million, then force me to sell the house for $3 million, walk away with $4 million total, and start his new life with Sienna. He probably thought he was being clever, thought he'd covered all his bases. But he'd made one critical error. He'd put all his cards on the table where I could see them. Now I knew the exact timeline. Now I knew exactly what he was planning. And I could counter every single move. I took photos of every document in his office. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it. That night at dinner, Derek was in a particularly good mood. The development deal is looking good, he said. Should close right on schedule in 3 weeks. That's wonderful, I said. You've worked so hard on that project. Yeah, he said. It's going to be a big payout. Life-changing, really. I'm happy for you, I said, and I meant it. Because that payout was going to change my life, just not in the way Derek imagined. 2 days later, I met with Marcus again. I have everything, I told him, laying out all my documentation. The forged deed, the financial transfers, the surveillance showing the affair, the property appraisal showing his intent to sell. All of it. Marcus reviewed everything carefully, his expression growing grimmer by the page. This is fraud, he said. Clear, documented fraud. Victoria, Derek could go to prison for this. Good, I said coldly. What do we need to do? Marcus laid out the strategy. We'd wait until Derek's development deal closed and the money hit his account. The moment it did, we'd file for divorce and simultaneously file criminal charges for forgery and fraud. We'd freeze all accounts, file a restraining order keeping him from the property, and file an emergency motion to prevent any asset transfers. He'll be blindsided, Marcus said. He won't have time to hide money or retaliate. By the time he realizes what's happening, everything will be locked down. What about Sienna? I asked. She's a tenant. You'll serve her with a notice to vacate. Since she's only been there 2 months, she won't have any tenant protection rights. She'll have to leave. Perfect, I said. With 3 weeks until D-Day, I allowed myself to relax slightly. Everything was in place. All I had to do was wait. But then something unexpected happened. Sienna knocked on my door one evening. She looked upset, her eyes red from crying. Victoria, can I talk to you? She asked. Of course, I said, concerned despite myself.
Come in.
What's wrong? She sat on my couch, twisting her hands nervously. I need to tell you something. Something's about Derek. My heart skipped. Had she figured it out? Was she about to confess? Derek and I. She started, then stopped. We're together. Romantically. I know I should have told you before I moved in. I feel terrible about it. But he said you two were basically separated, that you barely talked, that it was just a matter of time before you got divorced.
I zegt her.
She was confessing. Actually confessing. How long? I asked quietly. Almost a year, she admitted. I'm so sorry. I know how this looks. But Victoria, he loves me. And I love him. He's planning to leave you soon. To start fresh with me. I let the silence hang there for a moment. Then I asked, did Derek tell you about this house? About who owns it? Sienna looked confused by the question. He said you bought it together. Why? My grandmother left me this property, I said. It's been in my family for 3 generations. Derek's name was never on the deed until 2 years ago, when someone forged my signature to add him. Sienna's face went pale. What? Derek's been planning this for a long time, Sienna. The affair. Moving you here. Selling this house, and taking half the money. Did you really think it was just about love?
No, Sienna whispered.
He wouldn't, he loves me. He loves your youth, I said. He loves having you as his exit strategy. But love?
No.
Derek doesn't love anyone but himself. Sienna stood up, tears streaming down her face. You're lying. You're just trying to break us up because you're jealous. Am I? I asked calmly. Ask him about the forged deed. Ask him about the property sale he's planning. Ask him if he told you he'd take half my money and use it to start a new life with you. Sienna ran out, slamming the door behind her. I sat there for a long moment, processing what had just happened. Sienna had confessed. She'd actually confessed. And she'd done it on my property, in my house, where Angela's surveillance cameras had recorded every word. I called Marcus immediately. We have a confession. Full admission of the affair on video. That changes things, Marcus said. In Texas, if you can prove adultery, you can get a disproportionate division of community property. Plus, her testimony could be compelled. Everything was falling into place even better than I'd planned. That night, I heard Derek and Sienna arguing in the guest house. Their voices carried across the yard. I couldn't hear specific words, but the tone was clear. She was confronting him. He was probably denying everything, calling me crazy, trying to smooth it over. I wondered if she believed him. If she wanted to believe him badly enough to ignore the truth. It didn't matter. In 2.5 weeks, none of it would matter. The final countdown had begun. And Derek Reed had no idea that the woman he'd underestimated, the wife he'd thought was too naive to notice his schemes, was about to destroy everything he'd worked for. He thought he was the shark. He thought he was the one in control. But he was wrong. I was the one holding all the cards. I was the one who'd been playing the long game. And in exactly 90 days, Derek would learn what it cost to underestimate Victoria Reed. After Sienna's confession and her confrontation with Derek, things got interesting. The next morning, Derek came into the kitchen while I was making coffee. He looked tired, like he hadn't slept well. Good. Vic, we need to talk, he said. I turned, coffee mug in hand, expression carefully neutral. About what? Sienna came to you yesterday, he said. She told me. She said you were saying things about me. About the house. I told her the truth. I said calmly. That my grandmother left me this property. That's not a secret, Derek. You made it sound like I was trying to steal it from you, Derek said, his voice getting an edge. Like I forged documents or something. That's crazy. I took a sip of coffee, letting the moment hang. Did I say you forged documents? Or did Sienna jump to that conclusion on her own? Derek's face reddened. You were trying to turn her against me. I was being honest with your... What did you call her? Your buddy from college? I raised an eyebrow. Funny, Derek. She told me you've been together almost a year. That's a long time for a buddy. Derek froze. She told you. She confessed everything, I said. Came to my door crying. Said she felt terrible. Said you promised to leave me for her. It was very dramatic. I watched Derek's mind race, trying to figure out how to play this. He'd been caught. His mistress had confessed. His plan was unraveling. But instead of apologizing or confessing himself, he did something that confirmed everything I thought about him. He went on the offensive. Fine, he said, his voice hard. You want the truth? Yes, I've been seeing Sienna. Because you and I haven't had a real marriage in years. You're always working, always busy with your art clients and your trust fund meetings. I needed someone who actually paid attention to me. The classic cheater's defense. Blame the victim. So it's my fault, I said flatly. I'm not saying it's your fault, Derek backtracked. I'm saying we've both been unhappy. And maybe it's time we admitted this isn't working. Are you asking for a divorce? I asked, knowing full well what his answer would be. I think we should consider it, Derek said. Amicably. We can split everything fairly. You keep your business, I keep mine. We sell the house and split the proceeds. Clean break. There it was. The script he'd been planning. The reasonable-sounding proposal that would give him half my property. I'm not selling this house, I said quietly. It's my grandmother's legacy. It's marital property, Derek said. We've been married 8 years. I have a right to half its value. Actually, I said, property inherited before or during marriage remains separate property in Texas, unless it's been commingled. This house was never marital property. I could see Derek's jaw tighten. He hadn't expected me to know the law. We can let lawyers figure that out, he said. But Vic, we're getting divorced either way. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. I think, I said carefully, we should wait. Take some time to really think about this. You're obviously going through something with Sienna. Let's not make any hasty decisions. Derek looked confused. He'd expected a fight. Expected me to throw him out, file for divorce immediately, make a scene. Instead, I was suggesting we wait. which completely derailed his timeline. Wait, he repeated. For what? To make sure we're making the right decision, I said. Maybe we can try counseling first. Work through our issues. I don't want counseling, Derek said flatly. I want a divorce. Well, I need time to think, I said. This is a lot to process. You've been cheating on me for a year, Derek. You're living with your mistress in my backyard. I think I deserve a little time to figure out how I feel about all of this. Derek couldn't argue with that without looking like a complete monster. So he did what any trap man would do. He agreed, thinking he could push for divorce later.
Fine, he said.
Take some time. But Vic, this marriage is over. You need to accept that.
We'll see, I said.
After he left for work, I called Marcus. Derek knows I know about the affair, I told him. He's pushing for divorce now. Wants to sell the house and split everything. Did you agree? Marcus asked.
No.
I told him I need time. That bought us a few more weeks. Good. The longer we wait, the more evidence we gather. And Victoria? If Derek is pushing for divorce now, before his deal closes, that actually works in our favor. It shows intent. How so? If he files for divorce before the development deal closes, the payout becomes part of the marital estate automatically. He can't hide it or claim it's post-separation. We'll have a stronger claim to half of that $5 million. I smiled. Derek's impatience was working against him. Over the next week, the tension in the house was palpable. Derek barely spoke to me. He spent most of his time either at work or in the guest house with Sienna. And Sienna? Sienna was avoiding me. I'd see her coming and going, and she'd duck her head, hurry to her car. The guilt was eating at her.
Good.
Let it. But then something unexpected happened. Sienna knocked on my door again. Victoria, she said when I answered. Can we talk? Please. I let her in, curious about what she wanted. She sat on the same couch where she'd confessed a week ago, looking even more miserable. I don't know what to do, she said. Derek says you're lying about everything, that you're trying to manipulate me to hurt him. But then I looked up property records online and I prompted. Your name is on the deed. Alone. Then 2 years ago, Derek's name was added. She looked at me with wide, scared eyes. Did you really not sign that?
No, I said.
I didn't. Oh God, Sienna whispered. He really did forge it. He did, I confirmed. And he's been moving money around too. Preparing for divorce. Getting everything in place to take half of what's mine. I didn't know, Sienna said, tears streaming down her face. I swear, Victoria, I didn't know. He told me you were rich and cold and that you didn't care about him. He said the marriage was over in everything but paperwork. He made it sound like you were just roommates. We weren't, I said. Or at least I didn't know we were. Up until 3 months ago, I thought we had a normal marriage. I'm so sorry, Sienna sobbed. I'm so sorry. I need to move out. I need to end this. And here's where I made a decision that probably seems strange.
Don't, I said.
Sienna looked up, shocked. What?
Don't move out yet, I said.
And don't break up with him. Why not? Because Derek has been planning this for a long time. Forging documents, hiding money, setting up his exit strategy. And if you leave now, if you break up with him, he'll just find another way to execute his plan. But if you stay, if you keep him thinking everything is going according to his timeline, I can build my case. What case? A legal case, I said. For forgery. For fraud. For theft. Derek is going to pay for what he's done, Sienna. But I need time to make sure he can't wriggle out of it. Sienna stared at me. You want me to keep pretending? To keep seeing him while you gather evidence. I'm not asking you to do anything you're not already doing, I pointed out. You're living here. You're with Derek. The only difference is now you know the truth. And now you can help me make sure he faces consequences. Why would you want my help? Sienna asked. I'm the other woman. I slept with your husband. You did, I agreed. And that was wrong. But Derek lied to you too. He used you just like he used me. Maybe for different reasons, but he still used you. So we can both be his victims, or we can both be the reason he loses everything. Sienna was quiet for a long moment. What do you need me to do? Just keep doing what you're doing, I said. Act normal. Don't let Derek know you're suspicious. Don't tell him we talked about any of this. And if he says anything at all about money, property, his business deals, or divorce plans, write it down. Document it. And tell me. You want me to spy on him, Sienna said. I want you to help me prove he's a criminal, I corrected. There's a difference. Sienna took a shaky breath. Okay, I'll do it. But Victoria? When this is over, I'm leaving Austin. Starting over somewhere far away from Derek. From all of this. That's probably smart, I said. After Sienna left, I sat there processing what had just happened. I'd turned Derek's mistress into an informant. It was risky. Sienna could tell Derek about our conversation, could warn him, but I didn't think she would. She was hurt.
Betrayed.
And she wanted Derek to pay for lying to her almost as much as I wanted him to pay for lying to me. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And Derek had scorned two of us. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare. Derek, thinking I was still processing and trying to decide about the marriage, went about his business as usual. He attended meetings. He prepared for his big development deal. He spent time with Sienna, probably telling her I was being dramatic and jealous. What Derek didn't know was that Sienna was writing down everything. She told me about conversations where Derek talked about his development deal closing, right on schedule. About how he planned to finally have real money of his own. About how he'd been stuck in this marriage for too long. She told me about how he'd been looking at houses for them to move into together. Big houses in Westlake Hills, one of the most expensive areas in Austin. Houses he couldn't possibly afford without selling my property. Every conversation, every plan, every careless comment, Sienna documented it all and passed it to me. I gave everything to Angela and Marcus. The pile of evidence was growing into something unassailable. Meanwhile, I played my own game. I'd mention things to Derek, little comments designed to make him nervous. I talked to my accountant today. I'd say casually at dinner. Reviewing all our joint accounts. Making sure everything is in order. Derek would tense. Why? Just being thorough. I'd say with a shrug. My trust fund manager suggested it. Wants to make sure I'm keeping good records. Or I'd mention, I ran into Marcus Hoffman at the coffee shop. He was asking about the property deed. Said something seemed off with the paperwork from a couple years ago. Each comment was carefully calibrated to make Derek wonder how much I knew, how much I was digging, whether I was onto him. But I never pushed too hard. Never accused him directly. Just little needles, little pricks of anxiety that kept him off balance. And it was working. Derek was getting paranoid. I'd catch him watching me, trying to figure out what I was thinking. He'd come home from work and immediately check if anything had been moved in his office. He was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as naive as he'd thought. At the 60-day mark, Derek made his next move. He sat me down one evening with a serious expression. Vic, I've been thinking. About us. About the divorce. Oh, I said neutrally. I want to handle this maturely. Fairly. I've talked to a lawyer. You've talked to a lawyer? I interrupted. Without telling me? Just consultations, Derek said quickly. To understand the process. And my lawyer thinks we can do this amicably. We divide assets 50-50. We both walk away clean. No need for a big court battle. 50-50, I repeated. Including the house? Including everything, Derek said. We sell the house. Split the proceeds. We divide the bank accounts. It's fair. Except this house was my grandmother's, I said. It's not marital property. My lawyer says it is, Derek countered. We've lived here our entire marriage. I've contributed to maintenance and improvements. I have equity. I'd been expecting this. Derek's lawyer, probably someone who didn't know about the forged deed, had given him the standard advice for dividing marital property. I'll need to talk to my own lawyer, I said. Of course, Derek said. But Vic, the sooner we start this process, the sooner we can both move on with our lives. He was pushing, getting impatient. His development deal was closing in 31 days, and he wanted the divorce process started before then. I'll call Marcus this week, I said. Derek looked relieved. He thought he was back in control. But what he didn't know was that Marcus had already filed preliminary paperwork with the court. Not divorce papers yet, but emergency protective orders that we could activate immediately when the time came. Orders that would freeze accounts, prevent asset transfers, and keep Derek from touching anything until the court sorted it out. We were preparing for war. Derek just didn't know it yet. 3 days later, something happened that changed the dynamic again. I was home working when I heard raised voices from the guest house. Derek and Sienna arguing loudly enough that I could hear them from my office window. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught phrases. You promised. It's complicated. I'm tired of waiting. The fight went on for 20 minutes. Then Derek stormed out, got in his car, and peeled out of the driveway. Sienna came to my door an hour later, her eyes red and swollen. He's lying to me too, she said without preamble. About everything. What happened? I asked, letting her in. I asked him about the house. About whether he'd really forged your signature. He got defensive, said you were poisoning me against him. So I pushed. Asked about his finances, about where the money would come from to buy a new place for us. And he admitted that he needs to sell this house first. But he said you'd already agreed to it. That you were fine with selling. Sienna looked at me. That's not true, is it? No, I said. I've never agreed to sell this house. He's been lying about everything, Sienna said. The marriage being over. You being cold and distant. Even the timeline, he told me he'd leave you 6 months ago. Then 3 months ago. Now he's saying after his business deal closes. He just keeps moving the goalposts. That's what men like Derek do, I said. They lie to everyone. They keep everyone on the hook with promises they never intend to keep. I've been such an idiot, Sienna said, dropping her face into her hands. I gave up my apartment for this. I moved into your backyard to be close to him. And he's just using me. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. Sienna was young and naive, and Derek had absolutely used her. What are you going to do? I asked. I don't know, Sienna said. I don't have anywhere to go. My apartment is already rented to someone else. I don't have enough saved for a deposit on a new place. An idea formed. A slightly crazy idea, but one that could work. Stay here, I said. Sienna looked up. What? You're paying rent. You have a lease, short-term but still a lease. Stay through the end of it. Keep Derek thinking everything is fine. And help me make sure he pays for what he's done to both of us. Why are you being nice to me? Sienna asked. I don't deserve it. Maybe not, I said. But Derek deserves what's coming to him. And having you here, keeping him distracted, gives me the time I need to finish building my case. You're using me, Sienna said, but there was no accusation in it. Just observation. I admitted. But I'm also being honest about it, which is more than Derek ever gave either of us. Sienna thought about it for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, I'll stay. But Victoria, when this is over, we're never speaking again. Deal? Deal, I said. With 25 days until the development deal closed, things accelerated. Derek's paranoia was growing. He'd started password protecting everything, his laptop, his phone, even files on the shared home computer. He was jumpy, irritable, snapping at small things. He knew something was wrong. He could feel it, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what. Meanwhile, Sienna was feeding me information faster than I could document it. Derek had been meeting with his lawyer frequently, preparing divorce papers. He'd been looking at property in his name only, no joint ownership. He'd opened new bank accounts I didn't have access to. He was systematically separating himself from me financially, while still maintaining the pretense of trying to work things out. Everything he did dug his hole deeper. Angela's surveillance was capturing gold. Videos of Derek moving boxes from our house to a storage unit. Photos of him meeting with real estate agents, touring houses in Westlake Hills. Documentation of him transferring money between accounts in ways that would be hard to explain to a judge. Marcus was building what he called the most airtight fraud case he'd seen in years. When we present this to the court, he told me, Derek won't just lose the divorce. He'll be facing felony charges. We have documentation of forgery, wire fraud, theft. Victoria, he could go to prison. Good, I said. You're sure about this? Marcus asked. Once we file the criminal charges, there's no taking them back. Derek's life will be destroyed. He tried to destroy mine, I said. He forged my signature. He stole from my accounts. He planned to force me to sell my grandmother's house. So yes, Marcus. I'm sure. With 15 days to go, Derek finally showed his hand completely. He came home with official-looking documents and sat me down at the kitchen table. Vic, I've had papers drawn up, he said. Separation agreement and petition for divorce. I want to file next week. I looked at the papers. They were exactly what I expected. 50-50 division of all assets, including the house. Sale of the property with proceeds split.
Clean break.
Except nothing about this was clean. Next week,
I said.
That's very fast. We've been talking about this for 2 months, Derek said. There's no point dragging it out. 2 months. Since right after I'd hired the private investigator. Since right after I'd started gathering evidence. I need time to review these with my lawyer, I said.
Fine.
But Vic, I want to file by the end of next week. This needs to happen. Why the rush? I asked, even though I knew exactly why. His development deal was closing in 2 weeks, and he wanted the divorce process started before that money hit his account. There's no rush, Derek lied. I just think it's time. We're both ready to move on. Are we? I asked softly. Derek's expression hardened. I am. And you should be too. That night, I met with Marcus and Angela at Marcus's office. He's filing next week, I told them. We need to be ready. We're ready, Marcus assured me. The moment Derek files, we'll respond with our own filings. The criminal complaint, the emergency orders, everything. What about the development deal? I asked. If we file before it closes, does that change anything? Actually, it helps us, Marcus said. If the divorce is pending when the deal closes, that $5 million becomes part of the marital estate automatically. Derek can't hide it or claim it's post-separation. And since he's the one who filed for divorce, he can't argue that he didn't know the money was coming. So we let him file, I said. Let him think he's in control. Then we hit him with everything. Exactly, Marcus said. Angela pulled up a folder on her laptop. I've compiled everything. Every document, every photo, every video, every recording. It's organized chronologically and by type of evidence. Forgery evidence in one section. Financial fraud in another. Adultery documentation in a third. It's ironclad. I looked at the screen. Months of work. Hundreds of pages of documentation. Incontrovertible proof of everything Derek had done. He's going to be blindsided, Angela said with satisfaction. He thinks you're just a naive wife who's going to roll over and take 50%. He has no idea what's coming. Good, I said. Let's keep it that way. The next 7 days were the longest of my life. Derek was on edge, constantly checking his phone, having whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Sienna told me he was freaking out about the timeline, about making sure everything happened in the right order. He'd apparently told her that once the divorce was filed and the development deal closed, they could finally start their real life together. Poor Sienna. She was still pretending to be excited about that future, even though she knew it was all lies. On day 87 of my 90-day countdown, Derek did it. He filed for divorce. I got the email notification from the court system. I'd set up alerts for any filings related to our names. Petition for divorce, filed by Derek Reed against Victoria Reed. Grounds, insupportability. Requested division of assets, 50-50 of all marital property. I called Marcus immediately. He filed. I see it, Marcus said. We're responding today. Emergency motion for protective orders, freezing all accounts. Criminal complaint with the DA's office for forgery and fraud. And Victoria? I'm also filing a motion to compel forensic accounting of all of Derek's business dealings. Do it, I said. All of it. You should prepare yourself, Marcus warned. When Derek gets served with all this, he's going to explode. Make sure you're somewhere safe. Maybe stay with friends for a few days. I'm not leaving my house, I said. This is my property. If anyone's leaving, it's Derek. Then I'm also filing for a restraining order, Marcus said. If Derek gets violent. He won't, I said. Derek's not violent. He's a coward. He'll run. I was right. 24 hours after Derek filed for divorce, he was served with my response. All of it. The counter petition. The protective orders. The criminal complaint. The forensic accounting demand. The restraining order keeping him away from the property. And most devastating of all, the evidence. Marcus had included a summary exhibit with the response, just the highlights. Photos of the forged deed with handwriting analysis showing it wasn't my signature. Bank records showing unauthorized transfers. Surveillance photos of Derek and Sienna. Financial documents proving systematic theft. Derek got served at work. According to Sienna, who heard about it later, he'd gone white, then red, then had to sit down. He called me immediately. 16 missed calls. 20 texts. What the fuck did you do? You can't do this. This is insane. Call me right now. I didn't answer. Didn't respond. Let him stew. Finally, he came to the house. But the restraining order was already in effect. He couldn't come inside. He stood on the front lawn, looking up at the house. I watched from the window.
His phone rang.
He answered. His face crumbled. I found out later that was his lawyer calling to tell him that the DA's office was opening an investigation based on my criminal complaint. That Derek should retain criminal counsel immediately. Derek drove away after that call. Fast. And he didn't come back. Sienna knocked on my door an hour later. He called me. He's freaking out. Says you blindsided him. Says the evidence is fake. It's not fake, I said. I know, Sienna said quietly. Victoria, I'm going to move out. My lease is up in a week anyway. I think it's time. Probably a good idea, I agreed.
Thank you, Sienna said.
For letting me stay. For showing me who Derek really is. I know I don't deserve your kindness, but I'm grateful for it anyway. We were both his victims, I said. In different ways. But we're both free now. After Sienna left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my back porch, looking at the guest house. 90 days. That's how long it took to dismantle Derek's plans and turn the tables completely. He'd thought he was the smart one. The one with the plan. The one who'd get away with forgery and theft. But he'd underestimated me. Thought I was too naive, too trusting, too soft to fight back. He was wrong. And in 3 days, when his development deal closed and that $5 million hit his account, it would all become marital property that I had a claim to. Derek had played his hand, and he'd lost everything. But the real reckoning was still to come. Because the game wasn't over yet. It was just entering its final phase. And I was going to enjoy every minute of it. 3 days after Derek was served with my counterpetition, his development deal closed. $5 million hit his business account at 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning. I know the exact time because Marcus had filed a motion requiring Derek to notify the court of any income or assets received during the divorce proceedings. Derek's lawyer tried to argue that the money was his business income, not marital property. But Texas law was clear. Any money earned during the marriage, regardless of whose account it went into, was community property. That $5 million? I had a claim to half of it. The irony was perfect. Derek had been so focused on stealing my inheritance, he'd walked right into losing his own fortune. But the money was just the beginning. The real crisis came when the criminal investigation started. The district attorney's office took my complaint seriously. They had the forged deed, the handwriting analysis, the bank records showing unauthorized transfers. They had evidence of wire fraud, Derek using electronic transfers to move my money without authorization. They had documentation of systematic theft over 2 years. And they had Derek dead to rights. 2 weeks after I filed the complaint, the DA filed formal charges. 3 counts of forgery. 2 counts of wire fraud. 1 count of theft over $10,000, which was a felony in Texas. Derek was arrested at his office. I wasn't there to see it, but I heard about it from Angela, who had a contact in the DA's office. Derek had been in a meeting with investors when 2 detectives showed up. They'd walked him out in handcuffs in front of his entire team. His mugshot made the local news that night. Local real estate developer arrested on fraud charges. I watched the news segment while sitting on my couch, glass of wine in hand, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Satisfaction. Vindication. And underneath it all, a strange sadness for the man I'd thought I'd married, who'd never really existed. Derek made bail the next day, $50,000, which he had to borrow from his parents. His lawyer issued a statement claiming the charges were baseless and motivated by a bitter divorce. But the evidence didn't care about Derek's denials. The divorce proceedings became increasingly ugly. Derek's lawyer tried every tactic in the book to avoid accountability. They claimed I'd known about the deed transfer and had verbally consented. We countered with the handwriting analysis and the notary records showing I was at an art expo in Houston the day the paperwork was supposedly signed. They claimed the money transfers were household management that I'd authorized. We countered with bank records showing Derek had changed the passwords on our joint accounts without telling me, preventing me from seeing the transfers in real time. They claimed the affair with Sienna was irrelevant to the property division. We countered that Derek's adultery, combined with his financial fraud, warranted a disproportionate division in my favor. The court hearings were brutal. Derek sat at his lawyer's table, looking haggard and furious. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. At one hearing, his lawyer called me to the stand, trying to paint me as a vindictive wife who was exaggerating claims to punish Derek for the affair. Mrs. Reed, isn't it true that you allowed Ms. Blake to move into your property? Derek's lawyer asked. Yes, I said. And you were aware at that time of your husband's relationship with Ms. Blake? Not initially, no. I was told she was a friend who needed temporary housing. But you learned of the affair before the lease period ended, correct? Yes. And yet you didn't ask her to leave. In fact, you encouraged her to stay. Why was that? I looked directly at Derek as I answered. Because I wanted to understand the full extent of my husband's deception. I wanted to know if the affair was all there was, or if there was more. And you found more? The lawyer asked skeptically. I found systematic fraud, I said. Forged documents. Stolen money. A plan to take everything I'd inherited and use it to start a new life with his mistress. So yes, I found more. Derek's lawyer tried to shake my testimony, but I had documentation for everything. Every claim I made was backed up by bank records, legal documents, or surveillance footage. Then it was Marcus's turn. He called Derek to the stand. Mr. Reed, did you sign your wife's name to the property deed transfer document dated 2 years ago? Derek hesitated. The paperwork was complicated. Victoria asked me to handle it. That's not what I asked, Marcus said. Did you personally sign your wife's signature on that document? Yes or no? It was a mistake, Derek said. A mistake to forge her signature? Or a mistake to get caught? Objection. Derek's lawyer shouted. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Hoffman, rephrase. Mr. Reed, the handwriting analysis shows the signature on that document doesn't match your wife's signature on any other legal document she's ever signed. How do you explain that? Derek had no good answer. He fumbled, contradicted himself, eventually claimed he couldn't remember the details. It was devastating to watch. The man I'd married, reduced to lying badly on a witness stand. But Marcus wasn't done. He pulled out the bank records next. Mr. Reed, can you explain these transfers from your joint account with Mrs. Reed to your personal business account? $50,000 in December, $30,000 in February, $75,000 in April. Those were legitimate business expenses, Derek said. Expenses that you didn't tell your wife about? Expenses that you hid by changing the account passwords so she couldn't see the transfers? I didn't hide anything, Derek insisted. Then why did you change the passwords? For security. Security from whom? Your wife? The co-owner of the account. Derek's face reddened. I don't have to explain my financial decisions to. Actually, you do, Marcus interrupted, because that money didn't belong to you alone. It belonged to both of you. And you took it without permission. That's called theft, Mr. Reed. The judge watched this exchange with increasing skepticism. I could see her opinion of Derek dropping with each evasive answer. Then Marcus played his ace. Your Honor, I'd like to enter into evidence a video recording provided by Ms. Sienna Blake with her consent. Derek's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed it. The video played on screens throughout the courtroom. It was from Sienna's phone. A recording she'd made of one of her conversations with Derek, taken during the week before he'd filed for divorce. In the video, Derek was clearly visible, sitting in the guest house, talking to Sienna. Once the divorce is final, we'll sell the house. Derek's voice came through clearly. It's worth over $3 million. Even after Victoria gets her half, that's $1.5 million for me. Plus the development money. We'll have over $6 million total. We can buy whatever house you want in Westlake. But Victoria said the house was her grandmother's. Sienna's voice said. It doesn't matter, Derek responded on the video. It's marital property now. I made sure of that.
How?
Sienna asked. I got my name added to the deed 2 years ago, Derek said. Victoria never even noticed. She trusted me completely. It was easy. The courtroom was silent as the video ended. Derek had just admitted on camera that he'd deliberately gotten his name added to the deed without my knowledge. That he'd done it specifically to claim half the value in a divorce. His lawyer looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. No further questions, Marcus said, sitting down with a satisfied expression. After that hearing, settlement negotiations began. Derek's lawyer knew they couldn't win at trial, not with that video, not with all the evidence we had. They proposed that Derek would disclaim any interest in my inherited property and keep his development deal money. I'd get the house free and clear. He'd keep his $5 million. We'd call it even. Marcus laughed when he told me about the proposal. Even, he said, Derek forged your signature, stole from your accounts, and committed multiple felonies. And he thinks keeping $5 million is even? What should I counter with? I asked. Everything, Marcus said. The house, naturally. It was never his. Half of his development money, $2.5 million, because it's community property. Restitution for all the money he stole from your accounts. And his agreement not to contest the criminal charges. Can we do that? I asked. Make the criminal charges part of the settlement? No, Marcus admitted. The DA's office prosecutes crimes independently. But we can make it clear that if Derek doesn't settle fairly in the divorce, you'll be a very cooperative witness in the criminal trial. Juries don't like men who forge their wives' signatures and steal their inheritances. I thought about it. $2.5 million. The house. Restitution. Derek would walk away with maybe $2 million after legal fees and restitution payments. After trying to take everything from me, he'd end up with less than half of what he'd started with. Do it, I said. Make the offer. Derek's lawyer took 3 days to respond. When he did, it was with a counteroffer. Derek would give up the house and pay $500,000 in restitution. He'd keep the rest of the development money. He's still trying to win, Marcus said. Still trying to come out ahead. Then we go to trial, I said. I'm not settling for less than what's fair. Trial could take months, Marcus warned. It'll be expensive, exhausting, and public. Everyone will know your business. Let them know, I said. I have nothing to hide. Can Derek say the same? Apparently not, because 2 days before the trial was set to begin, Derek caved. He agreed to my terms. All of them. The house was mine, free and clear. I'd get $2.5 million from his development deal. He'd pay $750,000 in restitution for the money he'd stolen. And he'd cooperate with the divorce proceedings without further contest. In return, I agreed not to seek additional damages for emotional distress or punitive damages for fraud. The settlement was signed on a Friday afternoon in Marcus's office. Derek sat on one side of the conference table. I sat on the other. We didn't speak or make eye contact. His lawyer slid documents across the table. I read them carefully, then signed. Just like that, 8 years of marriage were over. Dissolved, divided, finished. As Derek stood to leave, he finally looked at me. There was hatred in his eyes.
Pure un dilute da tred.
You destroyed my life, he said quietly.
No, y correcta.
You destroyed your own life. I just made sure you didn't destroy mine in the process. He left without another word. But the crisis wasn't quite over yet, because Derek still faced criminal charges. The trial for the forgery and fraud charges took place 3 months after our divorce was finalized. I was called as a witness for the prosecution. I sat in the witness box and told the truth about how I discovered the forged deed, about the unauthorized money transfers, about Derek's systematic plan to steal my inheritance. Derek's criminal defense lawyer tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone with a grudge seeking revenge through false accusations. But the evidence spoke louder than any character assassination. The forged signature, the handwriting analysis, the bank records, the video of Derek admitting his plan. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Derek was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 1 year. He was also ordered to pay additional fines and restitution. I wasn't in the courtroom when the sentence was read. I'd already given my testimony and had no desire to watch Derek's final humiliation. But Marcus called me afterward to tell me the outcome. It's over, he said. Completely over. Derek's going to prison, you're free, and you have both your property and your money secured. Thank you, I said, for everything, for believing me, for fighting for me. You made it easy, Marcus said. You came prepared with evidence and a plan. Most people in your situation react emotionally. You reacted strategically. That's why you won. After the call ended, I sat in my home office, my grandmother's home office, and let it all sink in. I'd won. Completely, totally won. Derek was going to prison. I had my house. I had my money. Actually, I had more money than I'd started with, thanks to the settlement. I had my freedom. And I'd done it all by being patient, by playing the long game, by letting Derek think he was winning right up until the moment he lost everything. But winning didn't feel quite like I'd expected. There was satisfaction, yes. Justice, certainly. But also exhaustion. The kind of bone-deep tiredness that comes from months of strategic thinking, careful planning, constant vigilance. I'd won the war, but the battle had taken its toll. The day after Derek's sentencing, something unexpected happened. I got a letter in the mail. Plain white envelope, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Victoria, I hope this letter finds you well. I wanted to reach out, even though I'm not sure I have the right after everything that happened. I'm writing from Oregon, where I moved 3 months ago to start over. I got a job teaching yoga at a wellness retreat center. It's peaceful here. Different from Austin. Different from the life I thought I wanted. I wanted to apologize. Really apologize, not just the surface-level sorry I gave you when everything fell apart. What I did, sleeping with your husband, moving into your property, being part of his plan, was inexcusable. I let him manipulate me, but that doesn't absolve me of my own choices. I should have questioned his story about your marriage being over. I should have done my own research. I should have walked away the moment I learned the truth. Instead, I stayed. Even when I knew better, I stayed, because I didn't want to admit I'd been duped. Thank you for showing me the truth about Derek. Thank you for not destroying me along with him, even though you could have. You had every right to include me in the criminal complaint, to sue me for damages, to make my life as miserable as Derek made yours. But you didn't. You gave me a chance to walk away and rebuild. That's more grace than I deserved. I hope someday you find happiness again. Real happiness, with someone who sees your worth and treats you accordingly. You deserve that. With genuine remorse and gratitude. Sienna. I read the letter twice, then set it down on my desk. Sienna had moved away, was starting over, was learning from her mistakes. Part of me was glad for her. She'd been young and naive, and Derek had absolutely manipulated her. But she'd also made her own choices, and she was living with the consequences. Just like Derek was living with his. Just like I was living with mine. I didn't write back. There was nothing more to say. That chapter of my life was closed. 2 weeks after Derek's sentencing, I had lunch with my college friend Natasha. We kept in touch over the years, but had drifted as our lives took different paths. She'd heard about the divorce. Everyone had, and wanted to check on me. So, she said, once we'd ordered and were waiting for our food, how are you really doing? The truth, not the polite I'm fine version. I considered the question.
I'm tired.
Relieved. Vindicated. But also just tired. That's fair, Natasha said. You've been fighting a war for almost a year. You're allowed to be exhausted. Everyone keeps congratulating me, I said, for winning, for being smart, for taking Derek down. And I appreciate it. I do. But honestly, I just want to not think about Derek Reed for a while. I want to remember what it feels like to live without calculating every move. Then do that, Natasha said simply. You won. The fight's over. Now you get to figure out who you are when you're not in survival mode. That hit something deep. Who was I when I wasn't strategizing, planning, fighting? I didn't know. I'd spent so long being the woman with a plan, the one holding all the cards, that I'd forgotten what it was like to just exist. Over the next few months, I slowly started to remember. I went back to my art consulting business, taking on new clients, building collections, losing myself in the creative work I loved. I redecorated the guest house, got rid of every trace of Sienna and Derek, repainted it, furnished it with pieces I loved. It became my studio space, where I could work on projects or just sit and think. I spent time with friends I'd neglected during the divorce. I took a trip to New York to visit galleries and museums. I started dating casually, nothing serious, just reminders that there were good men out there, men who were honest and kind. And slowly, the shadow of Derek Reed faded from my life. 6 months after his sentencing, I got a call from Marcus. "Derek's up for parole," he said. "Given his clean record before this and his behavior in prison, he'll probably get it. I wanted you to know in case you wanted to make a statement to the parole board." "Do you think I should?" I asked. "That's up to you," Marcus said. "The question is, do you have anything more to say to Derek Reed?" I thought about it. Did I? "No," I finally said. "I said everything I needed to say in court. If the parole board wants to release him early, that's their decision. He's already lost everything that mattered. His freedom for another year won't change anything." "You're very gracious," Marcus said. "I'm very done," I corrected. "There's a difference." Derek was released on parole 8 months after his sentencing. He moved to Dallas, as far from Austin as he could get while still being in Texas for his parole requirements. I heard through the grapevine that he was working as a property manager for someone else's developments, a massive step down from running his own business. His reputation was destroyed. No one in Austin real estate would work with him. He'd lost his business, his money, his freedom, and his future. Everything he'd tried to steal from me, he'd lost himself. The universe has a sense of irony, apparently. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I was at an art gallery opening downtown. It was for a new artist I'd been working with, a young woman who did incredible mixed media pieces about female empowerment and resilience. I was standing in front of one piece, a collage that incorporated pieces of legal documents, wedding photos, and broken jewelry, when someone spoke beside me. "Powerful work." I turned. The man was about my age, maybe a little older, with kind eyes and a genuine smile. He wore a simple button-down and jeans, casual but put together. "It is," I agreed. "The artist is incredibly talented." "Are you a collector?" he asked. "Consultant," I said. "I help people build their art collections." "And you?" "Appreciator," he said with a laugh. "I don't know much about art technically, but I know what moves me. And this." He gestured to the piece. "This moves me." We talked about the artwork, then about other pieces in the show. He was easy to talk to, genuinely interested, not performing or posturing. His name was James Chun. He was a civil engineer, originally from San Antonio, now living in Austin. He was divorced 3 years ago, amicable, no kids. He liked hiking and cooking and obscure documentaries. He asked for my number. I gave it to him. We went on a first date 2 weeks later. Coffee, conversation, no pressure. Then a second date, dinner, and a walk along Lady Bird Lake. Then a third. James was different from Derek in every way that mattered. He was honest about his past, his feelings, his intentions. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He respected boundaries. He didn't try to move too fast or push for more than I was ready to give. On our 5th date, over Thai food at a small restaurant in East Austin, he asked about my divorce. Not prying, just a gentle, "I'd like to know your story, if you want to share it." So I told him. The edited version, the affair, the forged deed, the criminal charges, the patient plan, and the eventual victory. James listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "That must have been exhausting," he finally said. Not impressive or badass or any of the other reactions I usually got. Just acknowledgement of how hard it had been. It was, I admitted. "I'm still recovering from it, honestly." "Take your time," James said simply. "I'm not going anywhere." And he didn't. James was patient. He let me set the pace. He understood that I'd been burned and needed time to trust again. 6 months into dating James, I realized something. I was happy. Actually happy, not just not unhappy. I woke up looking forward to the day. I laughed easily. I didn't spend my time looking over my shoulder or calculating angles. I was just me. Victoria Reed, art consultant, friend, daughter, woman. Not Victoria the strategist or Victoria who destroyed Derek Reed.
Just me.
One evening, James and I were at my house. I'd cooked dinner, something I'd started enjoying again, and we were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. "I like your guest house," James said, looking at the cottage. "It's charming." I followed his gaze. The place where Sienna had lived, where Derek had spent evenings with his mistress, while I'd been in the main house, planning his downfall. "It has an interesting history," I said. "Want to tell me about it?" James asked.
So I did.
I told him about letting Sienna move in, about using the 90 days to build my case, about the strategic patience that had driven Derek crazy. James listened, then smiled. "You're terrifying, you know that?" "Am I?" I asked, suddenly worried. "In the best way," he clarified. "You're smart and strategic, and you don't let people walk over you. That's not scary. That's admirable. I just need to make sure I never give you a reason to turn those skills on me. Don't forge my signature or steal my money and you'll be fine," I said with a laugh. "Deal," James said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then James said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For trusting me enough to tell me these stories," he said. "For letting me see all of you, not just the easy parts." That means something.
It did mean something.
It meant I was healing. It meant I was ready to start building something new instead of just protecting what I had. The crisis was over. The war was won. Derek was gone, defeated and diminished. And I was free, finally, completely free. To live, to love, to be happy without looking over my shoulder. Derek had tried to steal my future. Instead, he'd lost his own. And I'd gained something he could never take away. The knowledge that I was strong enough to fight for myself, smart enough to win, and resilient enough to build something beautiful from the ashes. That was the real victory. Not the money or the house or the satisfaction of watching him lose, but the knowledge that I'd survived, and that I'd emerge on the other side stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever came next. The 90 days had been a countdown to Derek's downfall, but they'd also been the beginning of my rise. And I was just getting started. 2 years after Derek's arrest, I stood in the same gallery where I'd met James, but this time I wasn't just attending. I was showcasing. The exhibition was called Resilience, Women Reclaiming Their Stories, and it featured work from 15 female artists, all of whom had survived some form of betrayal, abuse, or systemic injustice. The pieces ranged from photography to sculpture to mixed media installations. And tucked in the corner was my own contribution, a piece I'd never planned to create, but that had emerged during my own healing process. It was a collage incorporating pieces of my old wedding photos, cut up and reassembled into a phoenix rising from flames. Around the edges were excerpts from legal documents, the forged deed, the divorce petition, the criminal complaint. And at the center, in bold letters made from fragments of Derek's arrest report, was a single word: free. James stood beside me as people filtered through the gallery, studying the pieces, reading the artist's statements. "How does it feel?" he asked quietly. "Sharing this part of your story publicly?" "Terrifying," I admitted, "but also liberating. For so long, I felt like I had to hide what happened, like it was shameful or embarrassing. But it wasn't my shame to carry. It was Derek's. And now," James prompted, "now I want other women to know they can survive this," I said. "That being betrayed doesn't make you weak or stupid. That fighting back doesn't make you vindictive. That reclaiming your life is brave." A woman approached my piece, reading the artist's statement I'd written to accompany it. She stood there for a long time, tears streaming down her face. Then she turned to me. "Thank you," she said simply. "I needed to see this. I'm going through something similar, and I didn't think I'd survive it. But seeing this gives me hope." I took her hand. "You'll survive it, and you'll be stronger on the other side. I promise." After she walked away, James pulled me close. "You're amazing, you know that?" "I'm just doing what I wish someone had done for me," I said, "showing that there's life after betrayal, that you can come out the other side and be happy." "Are you?" James asked. "Happy." I looked around the gallery, at the art I loved, at the women sharing their stories, at James, who'd been patient and kind, and everything Derek had never been. "Yes," I said, "I really am." The exhibition ran for 6 weeks and was incredibly successful. Several pieces sold, including mine. A woman bought it for her daughter, who was going through a divorce. I want her to have a reminder, the woman said, that she's not alone, that she can rebuild. The money from the sale, $15,000, I donated to a women's shelter in Austin that helped domestic violence survivors. It felt right, using something born from my own pain to help others. But the exhibition did something else too. It caught the attention of a local journalist who specialized in human interest stories. She reached out, asking if I'd be willing to be interviewed about my experience. To tell the full story, the forgery, the affair, the strategic patience, the eventual justice. I hesitated.
Part of me wanted to keep the past buried.
To focus on the future, not relive the trauma. But James said something that changed my mind. How many other women are married to men like Derek right now? He asked. Men who are forging signatures, hiding money, planning exits while their wives trust them? What if hearing your story helps even one woman realize she needs to protect herself?
He was right.
So I agreed to the interview. The article came out a month later. The Art of Strategic Patience, How One Woman Outsmarted Her Fraudulent Husband, ran in the Austin Chronicle, complete with photos of my artwork and a detailed account of everything that had happened. The response was overwhelming. My email and phone exploded with messages. Some from women sharing their own stories of betrayal. Some from divorce lawyers asking to use my case as an example in seminars. Some from reporters wanting to do follow-up stories. But the most meaningful messages came from women who said my story had given them courage. Courage to check their property deeds. Courage to monitor their accounts. Courage to trust their instincts when something felt wrong. One woman wrote, I read your article, and something clicked. My husband has been acting strange, being secretive about money.
I thought I was paranoid.
But I decided to check our property records. He'd refinanced our house without telling me and taken out $200,000 in equity. I'm filing for divorce and pressing charges. Thank you for showing me I'm not crazy. Another, my husband told me the same things Derek told you, that I was too focused on my career, that he needed someone who paid attention to him. I believed him. I thought the affair was my fault. But reading your story helped me see that cheaters always blame the victim. I'm getting a lawyer. Thank you. Message after message, woman after woman, finding strength in my story. I realized that sharing my experience wasn't just about me anymore. It was about creating a blueprint for others. Showing them the warning signs, teaching them to document everything, encouraging them to be strategic rather than reactive. The article led to speaking invitations, local women's groups, business networking events, even a family law conference where Marcus and I co-presented on recognizing and proving financial fraud in divorce cases. At one event, a young woman approached me during the Q&A. My husband wants me to sign papers putting our house, which I inherited, into joint ownership, she said. He says it's for estate planning purposes. But after hearing your story, I'm scared. What should I do? Don't sign anything without having your own lawyer review it first, I said immediately. And if your husband pressures you, or gets angry that you want legal advice, that's a red flag. A good partner wants you to protect yourself. But what if I'm wrong? She asked. What if he really does just want to help with estate planning, and I'm being paranoid? Then he'll understand your need for an independent lawyer to verify that, I said. And if he doesn't understand, if he calls you paranoid or untrusting, ask yourself why he's so invested in you signing without professional advice. The woman thanked me, tears in her eyes. 6 months later, she sent me an email. She'd refused to sign. Her husband had gotten increasingly angry and eventually confessed he'd been planning to divorce her and wanted the house in joint ownership to claim half. She'd dodged a bullet. Stories like that made all the discomfort of sharing my experience worth it. 3 years after my divorce, my life looked completely different. My art consulting business was thriving. I'd expanded my client base significantly and had even hired an assistant to help manage the workload. I was working with museums and major private collectors, building a reputation as someone with excellent taste and deep knowledge. The guest house had been completely transformed. It was now my studio and office, a bright, creative space filled with art books, sample pieces, and inspiration boards. Every trace of Sienna and Derek was long gone, replaced with things that brought me joy. James and I had been together for over 2 years. We'd moved slowly, deliberately, building trust brick by brick. He'd met my friends, my family, understood my scars, and never pushed me to move faster than I was ready. We talked about the future sometimes. Marriage, maybe someday. But neither of us was in a rush. We were happy as we were. One evening, we were cooking dinner together in my kitchen, a weekend ritual we'd developed. James was making his specialty pasta carbonara while I prepped a salad. "I got a call today," I said, "from a producer at a cable network. They want to option my story for a movie." James's eyebrows shot up. "A movie? That's amazing. Are you going to do it?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me loves the idea of reaching even more women with the message. But part of me worries about Hollywood sensationalizing it, making it about the revenge instead of the resilience. "What would you want the movie to focus on?" James asked. I thought about it. The patience. The strategy. The fact that you can be heartbroken and furious and still think clearly enough to protect yourself. The message that women don't have to choose between being emotional and being smart. "Then make that a condition," James suggested. "Work with them on the script. Make sure they tell the story the way you want it told." "That's surprisingly practical advice," I said with a smile. "I have my moments," James grinned. I decided to move forward with the movie option, but with strict creative control. The process was long and sometimes frustrating. Hollywood had very different ideas about what made a good story than I did. They wanted to add drama that didn't exist, create villains who weren't real, make me seem more vengeful than strategic. But I held firm. The story needed to be authentic. It needed to show that real revenge isn't about destruction, it's about protection. It's about making sure the person who hurt you can't hurt anyone else. Eventually, we reached a compromise. The movie would tell my story accurately but would fictionalize names and some details to protect privacy. It would focus on the strategic elements, the evidence gathering, the patience, the legal maneuvering, rather than just the emotional betrayal. It took 18 months to produce. I consulted on the script, ensuring legal details were accurate and the protagonist's mindset matched my own. I wanted women watching to learn practical skills, not just feel catharsis. The movie premiered on cable 2 years after I'd signed the option. James and I watched it together, alone in my living room, because I couldn't handle the idea of a public screening. It was strange seeing my life on screen, even fictionalized. The actress playing me was talented, capturing the mix of hurt and determination I'd felt. The actor playing Derek was appropriately charming and slimy. But what struck me most was the ending. In real life, my story ended with justice and healing. The movie added something I hadn't expected, a scene where the protagonist spoke directly to the camera, breaking the fourth wall. "If you're watching this and something feels wrong in your relationship," the actress said, looking directly at the viewer, "trust that feeling. Check your property records. Monitor your accounts. Keep records of everything. You're not paranoid. You're smart. And if it turns out you're wrong, you've lost nothing. But if you're right, you might save yourself from losing everything." I cried watching that scene. It was perfect. Exactly the message I wanted to send. The movie did well. Not a blockbuster, but solid viewership. And more importantly, it sparked conversations. Online forums filled with women discussing warning signs they'd noticed in their own relationships. Divorce lawyers reported an uptick in consultations from women who'd been inspired to check their financial situations. One lawyer sent me a note. "3 women came to me this month with forged deeds, just like yours. They never would have checked if not for your story. You're saving people from making my job much harder down the line." That's what I was most proud of. Not that I'd beaten Derek, but that I'd created a roadmap for others. For years after my divorce, I got unexpected news. Derek had been released from prison on parole and had violated the terms. He'd been caught accessing financial accounts he wasn't supposed to touch and had been sent back to serve the remainder of his sentence. Marcus called to tell me. "Thought you'd want to know. He can't seem to help himself. Old habits," I said. "Does this affect me at all?"
No.
"Your settlement is final. He can't touch anything of yours. This is just Derek being Derek, thinking he's smarter than everyone else and getting caught." After we hung up, I sat with the news. I'd expected to feel satisfaction. Maybe even a bit of schadenfreude. Instead, I just felt nothing. Derek Reed had become a cautionary tale, a name in a story I sometimes told. He wasn't a real person to me anymore, just a ghost from a past life. I mentioned it to James that evening. Derek's back in prison.
Parole violation.
James looked up from his book. How do you feel about that? Indifferent, I said. Is that weird? I spent so much energy outsmarting him, fighting him, beating him. And now I just don't care. That's not weird, James said. That's healing. He doesn't get to take up space in your head anymore.
He was right.
Derek had stolen enough from me. Time, trust, peace of mind. I wasn't giving him my present or my future too. 5 years after my divorce, James and I got engaged. It wasn't a grand gesture. No sunset proposal or public spectacle. We were hiking in Big Bend National Park, taking in the vastness of the desert landscape, when James stopped at a lookout point. I love my life with you, he said simply. I want to keep living it. Officially. What do you think? He pulled out a simple ring. A sapphire, because I'd once mentioned I found diamonds cliché after everything with Derek. I think, I said, tears streaming down my face. That sounds perfect. We planned a small wedding. Just close friends and family. No grand venue. No society pageant. We got married in my backyard, under the oak trees, with handwritten vows and a potluck reception. My vows focused on trust, honesty, and partnership. James's focused on patience, respect, and choosing each other every day. It was the opposite of my first wedding in every way. And it was perfect. As we danced our first dance as a married couple, I looked around at the people celebrating with us. Real friends. People who'd supported me through the divorce, through the healing, through the rebuilding. This was what love should look like. Not the performative perfection of my first marriage, but the messy, honest, genuine connection of two people who chose each other with eyes wide open. Marcus, who'd become a friend as well as my lawyer, raised his glass in a toast. To Victoria and James, he said, may you have everything you deserve, which, based on what Victoria's been through, is absolutely everything. Everyone laughed. And I felt, for the first time in years, completely at peace. 6 months after marrying James, I did something I'd been contemplating for a while. I wrote a book, not a memoir. I'd already told my story through the article and the movie. This was a practical guide, protecting yourself in marriage, a legal and financial handbook for women. I worked with Marcus and several financial advisors to create a comprehensive resource covering everything from prenuptial agreements to property rights to recognizing financial abuse. It included checklists, sample documents, and real-world case studies. The book's introduction laid out my philosophy. Love and caution are not opposites. You can deeply love your partner while also protecting your assets. You can trust your spouse while also maintaining financial transparency. And if your partner claims that wanting legal protections means you don't trust them, that's a red flag worth examining. This book isn't about being cynical or paranoid. It's about being informed and prepared. Because the best time to protect yourself is before you need protection. The book found its audience. It wasn't a bestseller, but it sold steadily. I got emails from women who'd used it to set up separate accounts before marriage. From divorce lawyers who recommended it to clients. From financial advisors who used it in their practice. One woman wrote, I bought your book before getting married. My fiancé was offended that I wanted a prenup. We went to therapy about it, and the therapist helped me see that his resistance to me protecting my inheritance was about control, not love.
We didn't get married.
Thank you for helping me see that before it was too late. That email made me cry. I'd saved someone from my fate. 7 years after my divorce from Derek, I stood in front of a room full of women at a financial literacy workshop I'd been invited to speak at. How many of you, I asked, know exactly what's in your joint bank accounts? Who can access them? What the passwords are? A few hands went up, maybe a quarter of the room. How many of you have looked at your property deeds in the last year? Even fewer hands. How many of you would know if your partner forged your signature on a legal document? Almost no hands. This isn't about not trusting your partners, I said. It's about participating in your own financial life. About being an informed partner, not a passive beneficiary. Because if something does go wrong, and I hope it doesn't, but if it does, you want to be prepared. I walked them through the basics. how to check property records online, how to set up account alerts, how to recognize signs of financial infidelity, how to document everything without being obvious about it. Most of you won't need this information, I concluded. Most of you are in healthy relationships with honest partners. But the women who do need it, they need it desperately. And by the time they realize they need it, it's often too late. After the workshop, women lined up to thank me, to share their stories, to ask questions. One older woman, probably in her 70s, waited until everyone else had left. "I wish someone had taught me this 50 years ago," she said. "My husband died last year. I discovered he'd taken out loans using our house as collateral without telling me. Loans he couldn't repay. I almost lost everything. I managed to keep the house, but just barely. If I'd known to check the property records, to monitor the accounts, I could have stopped it before it got that bad." "I'm so sorry," I said. "Don't be sorry," she said firmly. "Be loud.
Keep teaching this.
Keep telling your story. Because every woman you help is a woman who won't end up like me. Or like you almost were." That conversation stayed with me. Reminded me why sharing my experience, as uncomfortable as it sometimes was, mattered. 10 years after my divorce, I was truly happy. James and I had talked about kids and decided we were content as we were. We had full lives, my consulting business, his engineering projects, our shared love of travel and art and good food. We'd bought a small weekend place in Marfa, a tiny art town in West Texas. It was our escape, our creative retreat, the place where we could disconnect and just be. I'd made peace with my past. Derek was a chapter in my story, but not the defining one. The defining chapter was what came after, the rebuilding, the healing, the finding of real love. Sometimes I'd drive past the courthouse where my divorce had been finalized, or the police station where Derek had been arrested, and I'd feel a strange kind of gratitude. Not for what Derek had done. That was unforgivable. But for what I discovered about myself in fighting back. That I was smarter than I'd known, stronger than I'd believed, more capable than anyone had given me credit for. Derek had tried to break me. Instead, he'd forged me into steel. One evening, James and I were sitting on our back porch, the same spot where Sienna's cottage had once stood. We'd torn down the old guest house and built a new one, a proper art studio where I could work on personal projects. "What are you thinking about?" James asked, noticing my contemplative expression. "How different my life is now," I said. 10 years ago, I was married to Derek, thinking I had everything figured out. I had no idea how wrong I was. "Regrets?" James asked. I thought about it.
No.
I wish I hadn't been betrayed. I wish I hadn't had to fight that battle. But I don't regret how I fought it. And I don't regret where it led me. "To me?" James said with a smile. "To me," I corrected. "To understanding who I am when I have to fight for myself. You're a wonderful bonus." But the real prize was discovering I didn't need saving. I could save myself. James raised his glass. "To Victoria Reed, the woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint, who turned pain into power, who showed everyone what strategic patience looks like." I clinked my glass against his. "And to James Chin, the man who loved a woman with battle scars and never tried to be her hero. Just her partner." "I like being your partner," James said. "Good," I said, "because you're stuck with me." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the Austin sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. My grandmother's house, my house, stood behind us, solid and unchanged. The property Derek had tried to steal. The home I'd fought to keep. But it was more than just a house now. It was a symbol of resilience, of smart strategy, of the power that comes from being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. Derek had moved his mistress into my backyard, thinking I was too naive to notice, too weak to fight back. He'd been wrong on both counts. I'd let her settle in, get comfortable, even redecorate, because I knew something he didn't. Something that would turn his entire world upside down in exactly 90 days. I knew my own worth. I knew my rights. I knew the law. And I knew how to play the long game. Derek had thought he was the chess player, moving pieces around the board. But I'd been playing a different game entirely. One where patience was power. Where strategy beat emotion. where the person who looked weak was actually gathering strength for the final move. He'd lost everything. His freedom, his money, his reputation, his future. And I'd gained everything. My property, my peace, my power, my freedom. But most importantly, I'd gained the knowledge that I was strong enough to survive betrayal and smart enough to ensure justice. That was the real victory. Not revenge, but resilience. Not destruction, but reconstruction. Derek Reed had tried to write my ending. Instead, I'd written his. And my story? My story was just beginning. So what did I learn from all of this? What do I want you to take away from my story? First, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Don't let anyone convince you that you're paranoid or overreacting. Your gut knows things your mind hasn't processed yet. Second, protect yourself before you need protection. Check your property records. Monitor your accounts. Keep copies of important documents. It's not about being untrusting. It's about being informed. Third, document everything. In any conflict, evidence is king. Screenshots, bank statements, emails, texts, save it all. You might never need it, but if you do, you'll be glad you have it. Fourth, be strategic, not reactive. When betrayal happens, your first instinct might be to scream, fight, confront. Sometimes that's necessary, but sometimes the smarter move is to be patient, to gather evidence, to build an unbeatable case before you show your hand. Fifth, get expert help. I couldn't have one without Angela, my investigator, or Marcus, my lawyer. Don't try to fight alone. Build a team of professionals who can guide you through the legal and financial complexities. Sixth, remember that winning isn't just about what you take from them. It's about what you build for yourself. The real victory wasn't destroying Derek. It was reclaiming my life and building something better. And finally, betrayal doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. You can be hurt and still be strong. You can be heartbroken and still be strategic. You can lose trust in one person without losing trust in humanity. My name is Victoria Reed. My husband moved his mistress into my backyard, thinking I was too naive to notice, too weak to fight back. He was wrong, and I spent 90 days proving it. Did you enjoy this story? Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what resonated with you most. If this story helped you or inspired you, consider sending a super thanks to help me continue bringing stories like this to women who need them. Check out the other stories on my channel, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story about women who refuse to be victims. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being part of a community that believes in resilience, strategy, and the power of never giving up. With love and respect.